Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Mormon Atheist. So, thank you for joining us tonight, joining me tonight. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. Apostate congregation, I know that you guys are already subscribed, and a lot of you guys go back and watch these videos at a later time. That's fine. Like and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment of your appreciation. Do not send me church sources, TBMs. I've been having one agitator. You can clearly tell that these people don't know what they're talking about because of just the rhetoric that they use, right? So again, thank you, everybody. So tonight's topic, we're going to be talking about the original prophet, Joseph Smith, right? So the original prophet is an article in a magazine called Fraser Magazine. Fraser Magazine is a very popular magazine in the Mormon world. Everybody knows about Fraser Magazine, but one thing that you will not see is anybody tell you what's in Fraser Magazine. So everybody talks about it, and there's countless podcasts about Fraser Magazine, but nobody talks about what is actually in Fraser Magazine. Okay. So we're going to do that tonight. So Fraser Magazine, this particular one, right? It's a magazine, and it's full of various articles, right? There's a whole bunch of different articles in it. Some of them are just poems. That's all it's in them is poems. Some of them they're talking about Masonry. Some of them are talking about just the daily events of, the politics of the day. It's just a magazine, right? So the name of this article in the name of this article in Fraser Magazine is called The Original Prophet. Okay. And it came out in 1873. Okay. Now, if you remember, my personal interest is from 1700 to 1844 when Joseph Smith died. Okay. So I take books that are written in that time frame, and I read them. And then I report to the apostate congregation on them, which is you guys. So, and then I urge everybody to read the books. I give the name of the books. I give the authors, the year they were written, what the books are about. And the entire point of that is to compare notes. Okay. So we're comparing notes, right? What does the church say today, right? What is the story that we're told today, right? I am an ex-LDS member, right? I'm an apostate. That's why we are the apostate congregation. I am a proud apostate, and so we take these and we compare notes. So what were they saying at the time, right? When Fraser Magazine comes out in 1873, what is the talk of the town, right? What is the town saying? Again, apostates, you all know that we do not use church sources on this channel at all, whatsoever. We take the church's story, okay, and we go to outside sources to verify whatever the church is saying, right? And you literally can take your pick of any story that the church has to say, right? What is the church story? So the church says X, Y, and Z. Okay, well, let's prove it. Let's prove that X, Y, and Z really happened through outside source information. Okay, what are the people talking about? What's the towns talking about? What are the, what's the scuttlebutt of the day, right? Who's saying what? That is what we're doing, right? And no other podcast out there does this except for the Mormon Atheist. So much so that these other podcasts, when you're in the chats and they put up the person's name or whatever on the screen, they'll put up the person before me and they'll put up the person after me, but they won't put up mine. And it happens literally all the time. And I'm okay with that, because I know they know. Okay. I know they know. Right. And that's really all that matters to me. So I could care less, to be honest with you. I find it amusing. That's what I think. So, all right, so let's get into the topic. Fraser Magazine's The Original Prophet in 1873. The author goes to Salt Lake City and he talks to Eliza Snow, John Taylor, Squire Wells, aka David Wells, John Taylor, and Orson Pratt. Okay, I think I said too many names. Orson Pratt, Squire Wells, aka David Wells, John Taylor, and Miss Snow, which is Eliza. Okay, Eliza Snow. So the article starts out, right? The very first paragraph, he comes out swinging, right? He comes out and he says, he says, among the Mormons, okay, there's three things commonly stated of the founder of the faith, right? So Fraser, this article is 10 pages long, or I'm sorry, 11 pages. It's 11 pages long. You can look this up, you can Google it, you can, whatever you want to do, however it is you want to go about to find this. But it's only 11 pages, folks. So, anybody, it's a super easy read, and it's, it takes like 30 minutes maybe to read, 11 pages, right? If even that long. So it says, among the Mormons, there are three things that are commonly stated of the founder of the faith. Okay. And he says, 1, that an angel appeared to him. 2, he translated the BOM, Book of Mormon, by divine inspiration. 3, and that he sealed his testimony by a martyr's death. Okay. So those are the three things. And in today's world, that's what we know as well, right? So nothing too crazy there, nothing out of hand, right? So this is where it starts getting good, right? It says, he goes on and he talks about, he gives a little synopsis of Joseph Smith, and he says, and I'm reading directly out of the magazine, okay, out of the article. This entire episode is based on that article. So, and the better informed among them, even their teachers and apostles, the personal friends of Joseph Smith in old days, have little more to say. Okay, and then the author, which is an unnamed author, he goes through and he talks and he says some more. He says, I was surprised at the scantness of the information to be obtained. Right now, if you watch my other videos, right, you'll know that nobody can describe Joseph Smith. Nobody can describe him, his particulars. Okay, everybody can tell you the story, but nobody can describe him. Nobody can describe his character. Right, that is key. That's a key thing in literally every book I've read in this time frame, 1700 to 1844. Nobody can describe Joseph Smith, right? So he goes on and the people that he's talking with are Orson Pratt, Squire Wells, John Taylor, and Miss Snow. Okay. So then he goes on and he starts to have a conversation with John Taylor, Squire Wells, and Miss Snow. And he says, Miss Snow seemed perfectly willing to tell me all they could recollect about the prophet, but almost all particulars of his method of life, his ways of speaking, his acting, had apparently fled from memory. This is 1873, guys. Joseph Smith died in 44. John Taylor, if you remember, was in the jail cell when Joseph Smith died, right? So how is it that John Taylor can't even describe his method of life, his ways of speaking, his acting, all this has apparently fled from memory, right? Okay, it's John Taylor, you got to understand, right? So then he goes on and he says, it didn't even it wasn't even important enough to leave a distinctive deep trace, right? So how many people have you ever known? So 44, 50, 60, 70, we're talking, 25, years later. Okay. I can still tell you how, people that I knew 25 years ago, how they acted, what they were like, right? What their personality was, right? I can do that. And I know all of you can, right? So the memory argument of, oh, time has passed, memory fades, BS. Okay, BS. This is the founder of your religion, the prophet, and you can't describe him. Do you understand the impact of that, apostate congregation? Okay, so no one could recollect of him those small personal incidences or characteristics, habits, or striking pieces of expression, which are usually treasured so carefully of noted personages. Am I right? Okay. Is the author right? Is the author right? Nor have I succeeded in finding any such particulars in print. He can't even find the church's own story, right? He's scouring through the archives. He actually talks about how he's talking to the church historian Q Cannon, right? We all know that name. And Q Cannon can't even tell him. And he doesn't have any writings on him. 1873, there's no writings on Joseph Smith. Okay. Okay, so nor have I succeeded. Okay, finding it in any of the writings in print. It is possible that the Mormons dimly suspect that the less precise the knowledge of the prophet, the more profound their veneration is likely to be. Right. So the less people know, about this guy, the more important he is basically what he's saying, right? So this is really interesting, okay? Because this next piece right here, he says, the prophet has left behind a voluminous autobiography, but to one's disappointment, it is found to consist almost exclusively of a mass verbatim of revelations. Mass verbatim of revelations. I wonder what he's talking about there, apostate congregation. Republished in the authoritative book of Doctrine and Covenants. Okay, republished in the authoritative book of the Doctrine and Covenants, and forming, with the exception of the BOM, okay, the Book of Mormon, the most peculiar and tedious reading in the world, he says. So when the author is talking about this, right, you have to remember this is 1873. So in 1867, you remember from my other video, Reevaluating Mormon History, we talk about William Dixon's book, New America. And he has a similar sentiment of this, right? At no time does anybody ever actually produce a Book of Mormon. They all have the Book of Commandments from the Church of Christ, not the Latter-day Saints. Okay, this is the Book of Commandments from the Church of Christ. Okay, this is the book of the Doctrine and Covenants in the Book of Mormon. Okay, Book of Mormon. This is my 1984 version. If any of you have ever seen the movie 1984, you will know why I have that book. So, Church of Christ, Joseph's Church, Doctrine and Covenants, Brigham's Church. You understand? Okay. So I'm actually going to do next Sunday, okay, I'm going to compare these two books. I'm going to compare them. And there's some striking differences, some very striking differences. For example, this one only has 65 revelations. It ends at 65. 1831 is the last revelation in this book. This one obviously has more than that. And the last revelation in this book is 1978. 1978 apostates. I mean, you know, can we get any more fraudulent? You know what I'm saying? Like at some point, you just got to call a spade, right? All right. So let's keep going. That's going to be next Sunday. So next Sunday, tune into that, because that's a stunner. And there's actually, in this article of Fraser magazine, there's two revelations that he recites, okay, in 1873. They are not the same revelations that are in this book, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants. They are not the same revelations that are in this book, but they are the same ones that are in this book. Isn't that a coincidence? So all you ex-Mormon podcasters out there, that there's three that completely dismiss the Mormon atheist. Okay, well, dismiss this, son. Dismiss this. Okay, all right, so we're going to continue on. So he goes on and he says, he talks about the Smiths. Okay, so I lost my place. Okay, so converting. Okay, so the Book of Doctrine and Covenants, and forming, with the exception of the Book of Mormon, the most tedious reading in the world. All right. He goes on to talk about the Smiths, right? And he says this information should be preserved. He's going to the historian, right? The church historian, which is Q Cannon. And he goes in and he says this information should be preserved. But what is the use of it? He says, Brother Campbell from the Campbellites is Apostle Orson Pratt. What? Orson Pratt is Brother Campbell? I'm confused now. Okay. Apostle Orson Pratt, he says, is Campbell. Okay. And he replies solemnly, okay, since we shall have Joseph among us soon, why write the stuff down, he says. Okay, and then he goes into further detail as to why that is. He's going to be with our women and children. He's going to be, he's going to be soon, right? So they're literally like prophesizing the return of Joseph Smith. Okay, so Apostle Q Cannon describes Joseph as a young man. Okay, now when I say this stuff, right, I want you to think, right, like I want you to think about particulars. In any point in time in this presentation that I'm giving to you, do you hear particulars? What kind of jokes does he tell? How does he act? What does he do? Who is the guy, right? Okay, so as a young man, he was a great wrestler. Well, we know that. That's the story that we're told today, right? Is he was a great wrestler. So the overall arching story, right, never really changes. It's the particulars that change, right? That's so key. I can't like express that to you enough. The particulars of Joseph Smith, nobody knows. Okay. Fond of showing strength after he rose to his sacred dignity. Singularly transparent complexion. Okay. His eyes large and full, very penetrating. When preaching, his face became illuminated. He prefers to John. So the author refers, at this point, he refers to John Beadle's book, right? And I've done other episodes where I talk about John Beadle, right? John Beadle was never an LDS member, But if you Google John Beadle, you will see that the church has an entire write-up on John Beadle and how he was, an LDS member, all this kind of stuff, and he apostatized. In John Beadle's own books, he says, at no point in time was he ever an LDS member. Okay, this same thing happened with Joel Tiffany and Charles Anton, right? The church kind of hijacked their stories, and both of those guys also wrote books, and they also completely deny, like they denounce any part of anything having to do. Charles Anton, if you remember, was when Martin Harris in 1828 came and took him the character page, right? That's Charles Anton's role in Mormonism, right? Okay, so he goes on and he refers to John Beadle's book, Life in Utah, okay, published in 1870. You can Google that and you can look it up and you can read it, okay? And you'll find out for yourself, right? See, that's the thing with this stuff, with my channel, right? It requires reading. You have to read, okay? And if you don't read this stuff, you're going to think I'm nuts, right? Because you literally have no idea what I'm even talking about, right? So you have to read these books, read them, read the Book of Mormon, read the Book of Mormon, so you know what you're even talking about, right? So this is the Mormon atheist, but you know what? I have read the Book of Mormon probably 100 times. The Doctrine and Covenants, I study them all the time. I'm actually studying them right now because next Sunday I'm doing a report on them, right? I'm comparing the two books, the Book of Commandments from the Church of Christ, Joseph Smith's original church, and the Doctrine and Covenants, the Brighamite church, right? So of course I'm studying these, right? Because you would know if I brought this stuff to you and I never read it, you're going to know. You'll see me. You'll be like, dude, that's not what that says. Okay, well, when I read directly out of the book, right? When I read directly out of the book, you can't argue. You cannot argue. So, you ex-Mormon podcasters, I laugh at you. I laugh at you. Okay, so no malicious report of his enemies is so damning to Joseph Smith's character let me back up here, right? So 1870, he talks about the famous Joseph Smith painting. Okay, everybody knows the Joseph Smith painting. Excuse me. I do a video, is Joseph Smith a real person? And the thumbnail on that video is the Joseph Smith painting, okay? He says, is no damning in that painting, he says. In Brigham's waiting room, forehead recedes in a fashion scarcely human, he says. Repulsive to the extreme. He calls it the head of a criminal or of an idiot. Oh man, this is good stuff, you guys. I thoroughly enjoy reading these books. Yeah, it's just good stuff, right? No believer in the prophet should be suffered to see that painting, he says. No believer in the prophet should suffer to see that painting. He goes on to talk about an autobiography in the historian's office in Salt Lake City. Where is this autobiography? This is not the Joseph Smith papers, mind you. Okay, this is not, let me repeat, this is not the Joseph Smith papers. This is an autobiography by Joseph Smith. Where is this autobiography? Okay, where is this autobiography? He says the words are crossed through. The words are crossed through. They're cooking the books, guys. Okay, you understand that? They're cooking the books. In Joseph Smith's autobiography, he says the words are crossed through. It will be perceived that if the passage be reprinted as thus trimmed, the sense will much be modified. This but a trivial example of the way in which piety will lend itself to fraud. Let me read that again. Okay. This is but a trivial example of which piety leads itself to fraud for the honor of religion. That's strong. That's a strong statement, you guys. Okay, so I want to be clear. Okay, Joseph Smith's autobiography in the Salt Lake Historian's Library office, George Q. Cannon's office, right? Well, he doesn't say George. He just says Q Cannon. But we all know him apostates as George Q. Cannon, right? Okay, he says, it will be perceived that if the passages be reprinted as thus trimmed, the sense will be much modified. But this is a trivial example of the way in which piety will lend itself to fraud for the honor of religion. Apostate congregation, the entire Mormon story is a fraud. The entire story is a fraud. The whole thing is a fraud. Okay, so if Mormonism lives, the process of purifying and exalting the prophet's character will no doubt be carried to great lengths. This is 1873, apostate congregation. Like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, everybody. That's very important. Please like and subscribe to the channel. If you want more content like this, I have hundreds of books. I'm reading one right now that's about the Golden Bible. What is the Golden Bible? The Golden Bible is the first edition of the Book of Mormon. It is referred to as the Golden Bible. And I'm reading a book right now. I think it came out in 1881 or something like that, where they're talking about the Golden Bible. The entire book is on the Golden Bible, right? Yeah, so okay, so the process of purifying and exalting the prophet's character will no doubt be carried to great lengths. Well, what does the church say today? You know, I ask you, has it been carried to great lengths? Right? Okay. In September 1823, Joseph has a second vision. Okay, we all know that in 1823, he had his first vision. Okay, but this book, H.H. Bancroft, William Dixon, this is Fraser Magazine, John Beadle, all of them say the same thing. So when you have multiple references that are saying the exact same thing, and then the church over here, the outcast, is saying something completely different, you have to wonder, right? Who's telling the truth? Is the con men telling the truth, or are the people that are writing articles and books and, you know, giving these like stark warnings? And, you know, I mean, Solomon Southwick talks of his entire book, Solomon Southwick, is talking about the Church of Masonry, and he gives you these incredibly strong warnings. If this survives in the future, you will understand. If this comes to fruition, right? And he's literally telling you the church is coming for you, and you're not going to be able to stop it. Well, there's a very prominent podcast that all they talk about is the temple, right? And how they're just bullying these other towns and you know, into submission to, you know, so it's what they're saying in 1826, 1827. You can, no kidding, relate that to today. You can say, hey, Solomon Southwick, all of these people all talk about this. They all talk about it. Okay. And it's coming to pass now. It's coming to pass. So, okay. So, the first vision, he already had one in 1820, right? So that's two visions that he's already had by 1823. Okay, the vision was repeated 3 times that night. Repeated 3 times that night. We are told today that he had 3 visions on different dates, right? Whereas all these other books, they all say he had anywhere from 4 to, you know, never do any of them say 3, right? 4 to like 7 visions this guy had, right? And they've all been erased or whatever, right, through time. Okay. So that's 5 total visions right there. That's 5 total visions that he had in one night. 3 plus 2 equals 5. Okay. All right. So then he goes on and he starts talking about the Glasslooker trial. Okay. The Glasslooker trial in 1826. Apostate congregation. What else happened in 1826? William Morgan happened in 1826, right? Okay, so the William Morgan and the Joseph Smith story are so incredibly similar. It's almost, other than the name of the person, it's almost hard to distinguish the two because they're so similar. They both were arrested in 1826. They both went to trial. They both had a $2.86 debt. They both had, like, the list goes on. They both wrote a book. Both of them were 116 pages. They're both married to Lucinda Pendleton because after William Morgan dies, his wife, Lucinda Pendleton, marries Joseph Smith. So these stories are so incredibly similar. It's hard to distinguish the two people other than the name, right? Other than the name. Okay, so then he goes on and he says, the church has removed all information from the records except Josiah Stoll's story. That's it. Okay. Peter G. Brigman. Now, this is important, guys, because the Josiah Stoll story, I want you to think of what you know today about Josiah Stoll and that story. Think about it, okay? As I tell you this, Peter G. Bridgman, who filed the suit called the State of New York, the suit name is the State of New York versus Joseph Smith. McMaster's testimony, so he goes and he talks about there's a guy named McMasters, right? And he gives this great big long testimony. He talks about everything in the Josiah Stoll story is literally this guy McMasters. Okay, the names have been changed. So you can read this and you can think to yourself, wow, he's not talking about Josiah Stoll. He is talking about Josiah Stoll, but that's not what we're told, though. So you have to wonder, right? So let me go back and say the process of purifying and exalting the prophet's character will no doubt be carried to great lengths. Remember? Peter G. Bridgman. Have any of you ever heard that name? No. In the Josiah Stoll story? No. Have any of you ever heard of McMaster's name in the Josiah Stoll? Maybe a little bit, but that's it. And his testimony is like 4 pages long, okay? And you just get a glimpse in the story you hear today, okay? So McMaster's is totally removed. Jonathan Thompson is removed. Jonathan Thompson is another person in the Glasslooker trial, right? Thompson believes that Smith is a seer. So Thompson is the one that's being hooked here. We're believed that Josiah Stoll is the one that gets hooked. But this guy named Jonathan Thompson is the one that's having the issue with Joseph ripping him off, digging the well, all that kind of stuff. His name is Jonathan Thompson. Okay. He believes that Smith is a seer, right? Well, what is a seer in the terms of the craft, right? You have to remember this is masonry. What is the craft, right? It's the magic of Solomon is what the craft is. Everybody knows that. That's common knowledge. It's the magic of the craft. Okay. Okay. So the church says Stoll is the person that is the church says that, or I'm sorry, the author says that Stowell is the person that's fined $2.68. Now we have a conundrum. We got a conundrum right here, right? Same exact as the Morgan story, right? translating the plates. He goes on and he talks about how he translates these plates, right? The golden plates. Okay. Now listen, we're comparing notes. That's the entire point of the Mormon atheists. We're comparing notes. What does the church say? And what do all of these other books, all these other authors, all these other people, all these other newspaper magazines, all these other newspaper articles, what is literally the entire country saying about the Mormon movement? But then you have the church's story, and everybody says, we don't believe in the church. The church is lying to us. Okay, but then whenever the Mormon atheist brings you a book like this, they say that's not true. That never happened. Apostates, look, front page, issued by the Church of Christ. Okay, 6th of April, 1830. Okay, I mean, so now listen to the translation. This is him describing the translation. He sits behind a blanket hung across the room. How many podcasters have you seen in recent days? Like I'm talking the last like 3 or 4 months. Have you seen deny this story and say it never happened? And these are ex-Mormon podcasters. And they tell you this story never happened this way. I've got 7 books right now that tell you this story this way. 7. And every single one of them are credible. Every single one of them. They're all authors. They all have tons of books out. They all are college people. They all are professors. Solomon Southwick is a newspaper printer. He owns like a ton of different printers. He's the editor of like 7 different magazines. So, you know, come on. He's the founder of the anti-Mason movement. So the guy's not a dummy. He ran for governor, right? So he sits behind a blanket hung to screen the plates from mortal eyes. Okay. Translated by the aid of the big spectacles to a friend who wrote it down. Translated by the aid of the big spectacles. Every single book I have mentions these spectacles in some form or fashion. Every one of them is different. The description in every single one of them is different. Nonetheless, they're all spectacles, overlarged. They have some sort of stone in them and with a bow around the stones, and you put them on, and that's what Joseph used. It's not till later on we start hearing about the seer-stones in the Brigham days, right? As far as the seer-stones go, he used the seer-stones for treasure digging. He used the seer-stones for a completely different purpose than translating the Book of Mormon. He was using the seer-stones to put his head in a hat, okay, to do treasure digging. And in Fraser magazine, he says he's looking for oil, he's looking for salt deposits, he's looking for all kinds of different stuff, right? And as he digs the hole, the treasure remains the same distance away as he's digging it. Right? You understand that? As the hole gets deeper, the treasure gets deeper too, right? I mean, hey, this is 1826. No, hey, whatever. The BOM was originally called the Golden Bible. The Book of Mormon was originally called the Golden Bible. He talks about it very clearly. Mormon News Roundup, what's up? Songs of Our Own, what's up? So then he goes on to talk about the manuscript found. Okay, so he talks about Beadle, right? He says, Beadle says in his book, in the year 1825, while residing in Ontario, Canada, New York, next door to a man named Stroud. Who's Stroud? For whom Joe Smith was digging a well. That copy was also lost. Okay, so this is going to be Spalding's wife talking, right? So Smith was digging a well for that copy. She thinks it was stolen from the trunk. So they're digging a well at their house, and she has a trunk, and there's a copy of the manuscript found. Joseph Smith is digging this well in the and they have this copy, right? And she thinks that it was taken from that trunk, right? And there are several books that talk about this, right? So the Mormons made up the story about this entire thing, about the Spalding manuscript, right? How it was not the Spalding manuscript. I mean, we're going to 1820, like 1832, I think, is the first time I have a book that says anything about the Spalding manuscript. And every single one of them say that the Book of Mormon is based on the Spalding manuscript. All of them. And there's affidavits that people are signing there. One of the books actually says Spalding himself is the guy that debunked the entire Joseph Smith story. Well, wait a minute. Wasn't he supposed to die? So how is Spalding in all of these other books telling you that he calls out Joseph Smith? In Fraser magazine, he tells you that they called out Joseph Smith. Spalding himself. How is that possible if the church tells you Spalding dies? You see what I'm saying, apostate congregation? Let's go back. Let's go back to the other page. The process of purifying and exalting the prophet's character will no doubt be carried to great lengths. Okay? Because nobody can describe him. The Joseph Smith story has not been made up yet. Do you understand that? The Joseph Smith story has not been made up yet. In my opinion, from everything that I've read, Eliza Snow is the one that kind of concocted the entire Joseph Smith story. Because you can read these books, go through my videos and read them for yourself. Because otherwise you're going to sit here and you're going to watch my videos and you're going to say, this guy is totally wrong. Totally wrong. Well, you're relying on the church's story. Okay. I have completely removed the church's story from my brain. I take the church's story and I say, okay, let's go to outside source information, because you cannot use a cult to verify a cult, right? Is that just me? Am I the only one that thinks that way? Right? Go to outside. What is outside of the cult? What are people talking about? What are people telling you? How many cult videos have you watched where the brother or the wife or the whatever family member is, you're in a cult, and the cult member is just like totally shuns anything that has to do with anything negative or anything about the cult? You cannot use church sources to verify church sources. If your book is sold at Deseret Book, that is a church source, because Deseret Book only sells Mormon material. Everybody knows that. It's not a secret. There's some very prominent Mormon podcaster people that claim to be ex-Mormon, but I mean, I can show you pictures of their own chats, their own words. I can give you videos. I can give you the date stamp of when they actually say, I only use church sources. And this guy's supposed to be an ex, or he leads people to believe he's an ex-church member. And he's not. He's not at all. So you're being hoodwinked in today's world by so-called ex-church members that tell us that they've been excommunicated on their podcasts. They're not excommunicated. How can you only use church sources to verify church sources, I ask you? Okay, let's keep going. James Beadle, so everybody knows that the Spalding manuscript, okay, the first miracle, he goes on to talk about the first miracle. A man with an unclean spirit was performed by Smith, right? So this guy was, he actually describes how he's like in these like weird convulsions, and he's just kind of depressed, really is what it is. And he goes on and and so then while performing this act, Newell says he saw the devil leave the man. Newell. I'll leave that up to you to decide who that is. Newell. Okay. He goes on and talks about Ohio, Missouri. Then in 1839, Nauvoo rises up. 1839, Nauvoo rises up, but they're already in Ohio and Missouri. Okay. And then as if out of magic, he says, out of magic, right? Okay, you guys ready for this? I have looked for this particular word for probably 7 or 8 months now. Nauvoo. What does that word mean? What does Nauvoo mean? It's supposed to mean beautiful in ancient Hebrew, right? That's what we're told. That's what I was told anyways. I don't know what you were told, but that's what I was told. So there's quite a few books that say that Nauvoo means beautiful. It does mean beautiful, but in Reformed Egyptian. In Reformed Egyptian. Okay, they were accepted in Illinois as an unjust persecuted people. This is where the idea of persecution comes from. If you remember in H.H. Bancroft's book, Brigham Young is telling H.H. Bancroft that no man is a martyr unless he's been persecuted, and persecution is in parentheses, right? So they're literally creating this Joseph Smith story. You have to remember, guys, this is 1873, Fraser magazine. He's specifically talking to John Taylor. John Taylor was shot in Carthage jail, John Taylor was in Carthage jail when Joseph got shot. The founder of the religion, and John Taylor cannot describe the characters, the particulars, the lineaments of Joseph Smith. Okay, so they were persecuted people. This is where the idea, so from within the church, and they have been playing on that ever since. This is what the guy says in the book, in Fraser magazine. July 1843. This is a stunner. This is going to mess up a lot of you, okay? This is really going to mess up a lot of you because you have to remember these are outside sources, and the church has gone to great lengths. Remember, the Book of Commandments ends at 65. There is no 132. None. There's none. There's not even a mention of any kind of 132. But you know what? In this book, there's 132. Revelation, 132. 1831 was the last revelation of this book. Church of Christ. That's the Church of Christ, Joseph Smith's original church. I got this in Missouri. So when I went, so I moved across country, right? And on my way, I passed right through Missouri. And I thought to myself, how can you be the Mormon atheist and not go to Missouri? So I went to all the sites. I went to David Whitmer, Oliver Cowdery's burial sites. They're not there. I got into an argument on Facebook with the lady. She started showing me all these pictures of the headstone of Oliver Cowdery. And I said, watch the video. Because I literally walked through the cemetery is not very big. It's a little mound in a neighborhood. Okay, it's a little mound in a neighborhood. And there's no Oliver Cowdery or David Whitmer. There's a monument it's a 4-sided monument. On one side, it says Oliver Cowdery. The other side, it says Joseph Smith. The other side says David Whitmer. And the other side says Martin Harris. And that's it. And that thing is not even in the cemetery. So then I have the video, and I'm showing the video, and I'm walking through the cemetery, and there is no Oliver Cowdery or David Whitmer. There are Whitmers, but you have to watch the video to find out what that says, though, because it's not what you think. None of this is what you think. None of it is what you think. It's all bullshit. It's all smoke and mirrors. It's all smoke and mirrors. It's the Brighamite sect that literally threw Joseph Smith under the bus to create his church, right? They totally threw him under the bus. 100%. Okay, so let's get into it. What am I talking about? 1843, the celebrated revelation of celestial marriage. Now, in context of what the celestial marriage is, okay, the celestial marriage is, in all of these books, they call Joseph Smith a how do you say that word? Flounder, whatever, fornicator. He's basically a whore. He's a hoe. Okay, he goes around, he steals women, has sex with other men's wives. He's basically raping women left and right, more or less, right? And they have to cover this up. They have to justify it. How do they justify this? Okay, in 1843, they justify it by the celestial marriage revelation. Okay, now in the Book of Commandments, there is a celestial marriage revelations. It is not polygamy. It is not polygamy. It is not polygamy. It is not polygamy. It's celestial marriage to cover up Joseph Smith's rape allegations, okay, and his fornication allegations and his legitimate stealing of wives and these kinds of things, right? They say it in all of these books. Every single one of these books, they say the exact same thing. The only time polygamy is ever mentioned is in 132. You understand? There is no 132 in the Book of Commandments, Church of Christ version of the Doctrine and Covenants. Okay. And you're going to see some similarities, though, right? It was communicated in confidence. In this composition, so in the Church of Christ, I think it's you're going to have to wait until next Sunday to find out. Okay. But anyways, so the composition is he talks about Abraham, David, and Solomon are in favor of this practice, right? Okay. Now it's called polygamy. In 1873, this is out. Now it's called polygamy. So he's telling you, at first it's called the revelation of celestial marriage, and it gets changed into polygamy. Okay. Now Joseph Smith is justified in his past courage, he says. Now he's justified because now he's venerated. You understand? I implore all of you to look this up and read it for yourself. Read it for yourself. Don't look at me and call me crazy because I'm reporting on a book that your religion and all of you ex-Mormon people out there, you have an idea in your mind. That's not true. That's not true. That's not what the church says. Okay, well, you're right. That's not what the church says. You are totally right. That's not what the church says. Because they went to great lengths. You remember, Eliza Snow went to great lengths, okay? The other day, there was a podcast about, I forget what the name, I forget who the people were even are. I really don't follow any of these books or authors or anything of modern times, because I'm not interested in what they have to say, first of all, because all they're doing in my mind is stirring the pot with the church story. They're making all of you people out there think that they found something new. Oh, we found something new. No, they didn't. No, they didn't. It's on the church's website. You lazy historians, you went to the church's website and you wrote a book. You lazy historians. And you call yourself historians. What kind of a historian are you? When I actually typed in the chat and you physically, okay, you didn't even know there was a book of commandments. You didn't even know that. And you're a historian. Sucker. You are a sucker. Okay. Okay, so Solomon is in favor of the practice, okay, of polygamy, right? He's using the Bible to justify this. Okay, that's what it is. Joseph Smith is now justified. Okay, because he was a known adulterer, Emma was made jealous. Celestial marriage, okay? That's why they came out with the thing, because Emma, it actually says Emma was violently jealous. Emma was violently jealous. In 1844, in Nauvoo, William Law and Dr. Foster published in the Expositor the exposé to expose the Mormon leaders. We've all heard about the fire, right? They burned down the printing press because of this, right? Smith tried to take their wives. Okay, so in the context of this, okay, they're doing celestial marriage. Joseph Smith is a whore. Okay, they're doing celestial marriage. So these people are sick of Joseph Smith taking their wives. They're tired of him telling people that we're going to do this, we're going to do all this kind of stuff, and they form a mob, right? And so this mob is actually who kills Joseph is the mob, because they're, and all of these books say that, all of them. Go back and watch all my videos. They all say the same thing. The church is the odd man out here. You have to go to outside sources. If you are going to look and try to disprove anything about the church, go to outside sources. If you want to prove the church, stay in the sources, because that's what apologists do. Do I make myself clear with that? That's what apologists do by using church sources. Apologist. I really wish I could say your name, but I don't want to say your name because I don't want to give you that kind of validity, right? Yeah, I think you're scum, dude. Legitimately, okay? You are a huckster. You are a complete huckster. You're no better than Joseph Smith, okay? All right, so Smith tried to take their wives. He goes on to talk about Carthage jail. Now, when he says jail, in this Fraser magazine, jail, you have to remember the time, okay? Spelling was a little different. So jail is actually spelled G-O-A, or I'm sorry, G-A-O-L, jail, right? That's how they spell it, the whole thing. And he goes on to say, Hiram and Joseph were the only ones. They were the only ones in the jail. Taylor and Willard Richards were visiting and managed to escape. June 27th, 1844. The mob was 100 to 200 men. It was over the celestial marriage. That's what the entire thing was over. That's why he got killed, was the celestial marriage. Okay. This strange farce was over, he says. This is the end of the Church of Christ. Like the legit Church of Christ, this is the end of the Church of Christ. This is where Brigham Young takes over and calls it the Church of Jesus Christ. Okay, 1844. There's a very clear, distinct separation. It's very clear. Okay. So Brigham Young goes on to say how vile of a person Joseph Smith is. Huh? Brigham Young? I'm speechless. I don't know what to say. Brigham Young goes on to say how vile of a person Joseph Smith is. H. Bancroft, William Dixon, John Beadle, they all say the same thing. All of them say the same thing. Solomon Southwick, Elder David Brainerd. Okay, so the difference here is Solomon Southwick and David Brainerd. They're not talking about Joseph Smith as a church person. They're talking about Joseph Smith as a Mason. They never once say anything about Mormonism, LDS, nothing. They don't ever talk about any of that stuff in their books. They're talking about the Church of Masonry in their books and how the Church of Christ facilitated the creation from the 33rd Scottish Rites, the Church of Masonry, which is today what we call the LDS Church. And if any of you want to try to prove me wrong on that, I really highly recommend you reading Solomon Southwick and Elder David Brainerd and William Morgan, and actually read them. Don't just say, oh, it's just the hand. There's so much more to those books than the handshakes and the signals. So much more. If you listen to those books with an LDS ear, that's the key right there, is you have to listen to them with an LDS ear. If you're not LDS, you'll listen to those books and you won't have any idea what I'm talking about. or the names that they mention. They actually mention, watch my video, who is William Morgan and why is he important to Mormonism? Watch that video. That'll open your eyes. Okay, so the mob was 1 to 200 men. Then the author makes a warning to future Mormons. He actually warns future Mormons, right? And it's very profound, and it's the entire warning is about how when this church, if this church survives, right, you will see how terrible it is. Well, what are they doing today? Okay, they're building all these temples, and they're just destroying people's lives because the people, they don't know that they need that church. They don't know that they need that temple. So let us build it for them. Right? I mean, what a con. Come on. What a con. Who would fall for that? And Texas is not falling for it. They're fighting back. But all these other places completely caved, totally caved. Mainly because they can't afford it, right? They're being sued by the church, a multi-trillion-dollar company. If you think it's only 260 billion or whatever, you are sadly mistaken. That's just what they found. That's just what they found. Right? That's pocket change. If you read William Dixon, they actually tell you how much money the church was worth in 1900 or what was it, 1866. He tells you how much the church is worth back then, and it's in the millions. And if you equate that in today's money, this church, I mean, they probably own America by now. It wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me, right? So anyways, let's keep going. So then he goes on to talk about how Joseph Smith will be a martyr, pure, holy, and inspired teacher, founder of a new divine revelation. And then he quotes the last section of the book of the Doctrine and Covenants, which is this book, okay? And he said, and it doesn't really, it's the revelation. It's all in Roman numerals. So it's on page 125 is what he recites. And you're going to have to wait till next Sunday to get that recitation, right? And he goes on and talks about the Doctrine and Covenants and how just, profound. And so apostates, I want you to understand something. Like and subscribe, first of all. That's what you need to understand. So everything that I bring to you, every single one of my videos, right? They may be a little crude. They may be a little crass. I may not articulate what I'm trying to say very well, but I'm only 4 months into this. I've been doing this podcast for 4 months. That's it, 4 months. A lot of these other podcasters have been doing them for 30 years. Not podcasts, but their little spiel, their shtick. They've been doing it for 30 years. And they've never told you anything about this. They've never told you any of this because they only use church sources. And these are ex-Mormons, so-called ex-Mormons. The one I'm specifically talking about, I actually asked him in a live chat, do you believe that Joseph Smith wrote the Book of Mormon? And he says, yes, obviously I do. What kind of an ex-Mormon would say that? There's not an ex-Mormon on this planet that would say that. Yes, I believe that Joseph Smith wrote the Book of Mormon. You knucklehead. Okay? You're not an ex-Mormon. You never have been an ex-Mormon. And you're a hoax. You're a hoax. And one day, eventually, if you keep calling yourself a scholar, I'm going to call you out eventually, right? Eventually, because you're not a scholar. You don't have a PhD. You're not a scholar. If you're a scholar, what's your dissertation about? Post your dissertation. Okay? Let's go that route. Post your dissertation. Let's see it. Yeah. You're not a scholar. So stop calling yourself a scholar. And you people that rub his ego, you're rubbing his ego, okay? by calling him a scholar. That's all you're doing. And it kind of shows what kind of people you are, right? So anyways, that's pretty much the end of my my presentation here. Fraser Magazine, it's 11 pages long, guys. If you don't believe what I'm saying, or if you're not understanding what I'm saying to you, read it. Go to archive.org, look it up, Fraser Magazine, the original prophet, and read it. It's 11 pages. And you'll see everything I just said to you right now. If you don't believe me, read it. Read the book. Or it's an article. Read the article. It's an article. Okay, so like I said before, next Sunday, I'm going to compare the Book of Commandments with the Doctrine and Covenants. Okay, I got this from the Church of Christ at Temple Lot in Missouri. And yeah, it's such a different story than what we are told as Brighamites. The Church of Christ story, they have a Book of Mormon. They actually have a Book of Mormon. It's different than ours. They have a Doctrine and Covenants, but it's different than ours. And I do have the Book of Mormon. I showed it to you last week. I do have the Book of Mormon, and I am reading it, and I am comparing it to this one. I urge you guys to read the Book of Mormon. I urge you to read these books. Know what you're arguing against. Okay? Read this book. If you read the Book of Mormon and you still believe in it, don't ever talk to me again. Don't come to my page, or don't come to my podcast. Just save yourself the time. Okay. Actually, you know what? That's wrong of me to say. That is totally wrong of me to say that. Let's start a book club. Let's start a book club, Apostate Congregation, and let's read the Book of Mormon. Let's read it together. Okay. Read the Book of Mormon with the Mormon atheist. Yeah. You want to do that? Just message me, and let's start a book club. We can do it online. We can do a podcast about it. We'll read a couple of pages and then we'll discuss it or something like that, right? And if you're a TBM, you're the one that I want. I want you. Okay, the Mormon atheist wants you. So yeah, bring it on, man. Let's have it. Bring it on. Let's do it. Okay, so yeah, that's all I got. I'm kind of just going off now, rambling. So next Sunday, like I said, we're going to compare these. Right now, I'm reading a book, so I'll probably have in 2 or 3 weeks, I'll probably have a video on the Golden Bible. Okay, because I'm reading a book right now that was written in the 1800s that is talking about the Golden Bible, and it very much is the Book of Mormon. The original name of the Book of Mormon is the Golden Bible, right? So that's what I'm reading right now, and I'm going to eventually bring that to you. I also have an article. It's actually an interview with Martin Harris. And Martin Harris's wife, okay, I have to tell you, I feel so incredibly, horribly sad for that lady because of what takes place, what he does, right? Martin Harris is a straight scoundrel, okay? And he's an abuser. He's a complete woman beater, abuser. And she tells you stories in this article about how he abused her so badly that he left welts on her. And there's affidavits where people in the neighborhood went through and wrote these affidavits saying this, right, and backing up her story. And so and he would do this often. They say he would put her out, is what it says. So when it's like, minus whatever degrees outside, he would make her go stand outside, just stand there as a punishment, right? So that's brutal, right? The beatings are, and they're quite graphic. They are graphic. They go into detail. So, yeah, so I'll bring that to you guys. And like and subscribe to the video, apostates. If you haven't already, I thank you for joining me. we will continue to bring more stuff. And yeah, so have a good day and thank you. Like and subscribe to the channel. See you next week.